When I was growing up, it was during the 1960s when I was about 11 or 12. Okay, and this is the thing. The city of Detroit blew up in what the newspaper reported as a race riot. They quote unquote made it the blacks against the white people. But really what it was about was there were people that were poor in Detroit that finally rose up. And that's the thing, because they were being discriminated against, but it was more about class than it was about race. Now that people go back and study it, because when I was in college, I took Black history courses and other courses, and it was made very clear that this was not about race. And one of the interesting facts, the first guy killed in this riot in Detroit was a white guy taking on the police. He was angry because the city, and by the way, I was going to show you my boycott home. I lived in a very, very, very nice neighborhood. We were upper middle class. We were not rich, but we did really well. I was telling your teacher about some of those experiences. The weird thing was, I did not know one black person in my high school. There were none. No Asians. Actually, there was. There was one Asian. And he was from Vietnam, believe it or not. Remember, and this is 1967, and the Vietnam War is going on. And this family moved in. His name was Win. Guess what we call him? When I got here, I didn't know how to pronounce Win, because they had changed their name to make it more American. They didn't change it from Win, but we all pronounced it New Win. And I couldn't get that N out of my... When I first came here 6 years ago, I called every Win New Win, because my friend in school was... But he was the only person that was not a white, quote-unquote, person in my neighborhood. And then the other thing, when I went to college, my very first freshman year sociology class, you know what a case study is? Does anybody know what a case study is? Well, a case study is they can take a person, or they can take a neighborhood, or they can take whatever, but they only study that. Now, I teach Psych 2, and case studies are limited, but you can learn something about that one thing, but it's hard to extrapolate it out because it may not be true for everybody. The very first case study I read in college, in a sociology course, was about my neighborhood. And it was about discrimination. The realtors, the people that sell the houses, the people that live there, they had it, and this was all illegal, but it was all under the board. So if an African American or a Chinese or someone that didn't fit what I look like, they had an agreement that they would just add $50,000 to the house to keep them out, and then make it very difficult for them to get a loan. So even if you wanted to move in, they would do everything possible to keep that neighborhood white like me, which is very strange. And I'm sitting there reading in college going, God, what kind of neighborhood did I come from? I grew up there. I was happy. It was wonderful. It was a great place to go to school. The public schools were wonderful. Everything was great. But I didn't realize what was going on all around me. I probably should have. And by the way, when the city, I'm going to show you a little video with a rock and roll song behind it, but of what happened in Detroit. But it looked like a war zone because the people rose up and started burning things and tearing things down, and then the police had to come in, and then the army had to come in. This doesn't happen in the United States very often. It happens in other countries, it looked like other places, third world countries where the police crack down on the people, And for Americans to see this, it was very, very strange. Okay, one of the things my community did, and it amazes me. In 1968, 67 is the year of the riot. 68 was a presidential election year. On the ballot, and now you got to know what a referendum is. A referendum is you ask the people, do they want this law? There are two main streets that went into the city of Detroit where all this happened, right? One of them was called Jefferson, the other one was called Mack Avenue. They were going to leave those open. You know what a cul-de-sac is?
Yeah.
It's a road that it goes along like this, and then it's got a circle around it that you can't get through because there's houses that stop you. They had a referendum that luckily it didn't pass. It failed. They were going to turn every other street into a cul-de-sac where it met the city of Detroit, because they didn't want those people coming into our neighborhood. Except my father had to go to work, and a lot of other people had to work in the city of Detroit, so you had to have at least two ways they could all get out of the city, or out of my city, out of my part of the town. Okay? But the amazing thing is people were so prejudiced that they actually got it on a ballot that they wanted to symbolically shut us off from the city of Detroit. And that was what was in this. The thing about the realtors, and then the thing about the referendum, years later, when I read about it 10 years later in college, I was like, holy smokes, I didn't realize all that was going on in my neighborhood. The other, and by the way, this scared a lot of people. The city of Detroit blowing up in '67 scared a lot of people. And my parents had a personal friend. This is the other thing. Prejudiced people, they can be very nice as long as you're like them. Or they don't say it to your face. You know, they don't have any guts to say, I hate you because you are whatever you are, right? Well, a family friend would hire me to do yard work for him. I mowed his lawn, I picked up stuff, he paid me pretty well. And one afternoon, after working all day, I was all sweaty and moving rocks for him and doing whatever. He says, come on in the house. Now, this is a friend of my dad. And he gave me like a lemonade or something. And we're sitting in his kitchen drinking. And I've known him for years. He says, come on down into my basement. I said, okay, fine. I go down in the basement, and he's built a safe room. He had 2 years' worth of canned food. He had gone out and bought guns. He had gotten a radio, a ham radio. He had a generator down there. And he says to me, he says, last year, when those guys rioted, they're going to come and get us. I said, what? Because my dad and my mom never talked like this. And he said, I'm going to be ready. I got my gun. If somebody tries to take my property and come out here, they're going to die. But he was
mental.
Well, he was goofy. But he also had a job, interacted with everybody, was a good friend of my mom and dad's. I came home to my dad and I said, Gene, have you ever seen him? He says, oh yeah, he's a little crazy. Don't listen to him. I said, I'm not listening to him, but I think this is nuts. And my dad just said, there are people here that are worried that they're not going to burn down their own neighborhoods, they're going to come out to where the wealthy people live, and this is what's going to happen in this guy. And it never happened. Nobody's ever invaded my suburb of Detroit. But that's the kind of thing that this guy had in his head. And he was